Have you ever noticed how a single story can quiet your mind faster than hours of trying to fix your problems? There's something ancient humans understood that we're only now rediscovering. Truth doesn't always need explanation. Sometimes it just needs a story. Over 2,000 years ago, a teacher sat beneath a tree and told stories that transformed lives instantly. Not through complex philosophy or rigid rules, but through simple parables that landed in the heart before the mind could analyze them. These weren't fairy tales. They were precision tools disguised as simple narratives. Each one designed to bypass your intellectual defenses and speak directly to something deeper. The part of you that already knows the truth, but has forgotten how to listen. Today, we're returning to one of these ancient stories. No fluff, no modern self-help jargon, just the parable, its wisdom, and how it applies to the chaos you're facing right now. Because here's what's interesting. These stories don't just teach you something new. They remind you of something you've always known, but couldn't quite articulate. And in that recognition, that moment of, oh, I see, something shifts. Your anxiety doesn't need a solution. Your stress doesn't need more strategy. Sometimes, all you need is a story that shows you what you've been missing. Let's begin. Story 1. The Rootless Tree. Once upon a time, a powerful king came to visit the Buddha with a riddle that had puzzled him for years. The king was known throughout the land for his intelligence and had defeated many scholars in debates. But there was one question no one could answer. The king bowed before the Buddha and asked, "Enlightened one, I have traveled far and wide seeking wisdom. Tell me, what tree stands tall without roots? What house remains strong without a foundation? What person walks through life without support?" The court fell silent. The king's ministers and the Buddha's disciples all waited with anticipation. Everyone knew these seemed like impossible contradictions. How could anything exist without a base? The Buddha smiled gently, his eyes reflecting deep compassion and understanding. After a moment of peaceful silence, he spoke. "Your Majesty, the tree that stands without roots is a mind anchored in clarity and peace. The house that needs no foundation is wisdom built on understanding. The person who walks without support is one who has found strength within themselves." The king looked confused. "But Blessed One, how can this be? Everything in the physical world needs support. Trees need roots to drink water and stand against the wind. Houses need foundations to bear their weight. People need family, wealth, and power to survive." The Buddha nodded. "You speak the truth about the material world, but I speak of something beyond the physical. Tell me, when a mighty storm comes and uproots the strongest tree, what remains? When an earthquake destroys the grandest palace, what endures? When wealth is lost and power fades, what sustains a person?" The king pondered this deeply. The Buddha continued, "A tree with roots depends on soil, water, and favorable conditions. When these change, the tree suffers or dies. But a mind rooted in inner peace does not depend on external circumstances. It remains calm in both success and failure, in praise and criticism, in gain and loss." Similarly, a house built on land can be destroyed by natural forces. But wisdom, once truly understood, cannot be taken away by any external power. It is a foundation that exists within, unshakable by the storms of life. And a person who derives their strength from outer sources, wealth, status, others' approval, is like a tree with shallow roots. When those external supports are removed, they collapse. But a person who has cultivated inner strength, who knows their true nature, who has touched the peace within, this person walks through life supported by something no one can take away. The Buddha looked directly into the king's eyes. "Your Majesty, you rule a vast kingdom. You have armies, treasures, and subjects who obey your command. But tell me, when you lie alone at night and your mind races with worries, can your gold bring you peace? When you face your own mortality, can your power save you? When you experience grief, can your palace walls comfort you?" The king's expression softened. For the first time, he saw the limits of his worldly power. "The rootless tree I speak of is your true nature," the Buddha explained. It doesn't need external circumstances to exist. It is always there, always steady, always whole. Most people never discover it because they are too busy chasing external support. More money, more success, more approval. They become like trees that grow their roots outward instead of downward, always dependent, always vulnerable. But when you turn inward, when you cultivate meditation and self-awareness, when you develop compassion and wisdom, you discover an inner stability that nothing can shake. This is the tree without roots. It stands not because it clings to the earth, but because it has found its own center of gravity. The king sat in silence, absorbing these words. Then he asked, "But enlightened one, how does one cultivate this inner strength? How does one become this rootless tree?" The Buddha replied, "By letting go of the need for external validation, by finding contentment within rather than seeking it outside, by developing qualities that cannot be taken away, kindness, wisdom, equanimity, compassion, by understanding that you are not your possessions, not your status, not others' opinions of you. You are awareness itself, consciousness itself, and that needs no support because it is the foundation of all experience." Practice sitting in stillness each day. Watch your thoughts without judgment. Notice how emotions arise and pass like clouds in the sky. Observe how you seek security in things that are temporary, and gradually you will discover what has always been there, a quiet strength, a deep peace, a rootless tree that has been standing within you all along. The king bowed deeply. For the first time in his life, he understood that true power comes not from what you possess, but from what you cannot lose. This parable teaches that genuine strength and stability come from within, not from external circumstances. Most of us build our security on shifting ground, seeking validation through wealth, status, relationships, or achievements. We become like trees with shallow roots, dependent on favorable conditions. When life's storms arrive, loss, failure, criticism, or change, we feel our foundation crumbling because we've placed it outside ourselves. The Buddha points to a profound truth. Within each of us exists an unshakable center that doesn't depend on anything external. This isn't about rejecting relationships or material life, but recognizing where true stability resides. When you cultivate inner peace through meditation and self-awareness, you discover a strength that no circumstance can diminish. Your worth becomes independent of others' opinions. Your peace becomes independent of external conditions. The rootless tree stands firm not by clinging to earth, but by finding its own center of gravity. Similarly, when we stop seeking external support and turn inward, we access something permanent: wisdom that cannot be stolen, peace that doesn't fluctuate, and a sense of completeness that needs nothing added. True freedom means needing nothing outside yourself to feel whole. Story 2. The Hot Coal. In a peaceful monastery nestled in the mountains, there lived a young monk named Ananda who struggled deeply with anger. Though he practiced meditation daily and followed the Buddha's teachings diligently, he found himself constantly irritated by a fellow monk named Devadatta. Devadatta seemed to do everything wrong in Ananda's eyes. He chanted too loudly during morning prayers. He left his sandals in the wrong place. He took more than his share of rice at meals. He spoke when silence was expected. Day after day, Ananda's resentment grew like a fire slowly consuming dry wood. One morning, after Devadatta had accidentally knocked over Ananda's carefully arranged meditation cushion, Ananda's anger finally erupted. His face flushed red, his fists clenched, and his whole body trembled with rage. He stormed out of the meditation hall, his mind burning with thoughts of revenge and harsh words he wanted to say. The Buddha, who had been observing from a distance, quietly followed Ananda into the garden. He found the young monk pacing back and forth, muttering angrily to himself, rehearsing all the things he would say to humiliate Devadatta in front of the other monks. "Ananda," the Buddha called softly. The young monk turned, surprised to see his teacher. He quickly tried to compose himself, but his anger was still visible in his eyes and the tension in his jaw. The Buddha walked to the fire pit where coals from the morning's cooking still glowed with heat. He bent down and picked up a burning piece of coal with his bare hand, then held it out toward Ananda. "Here," the Buddha said calmly, "I want you to take this coal and throw it at Devadatta to punish him for his wrongdoings." Ananda looked at the Buddha in shock. "But, Blessed One, I cannot take that. It will burn my hand terribly. I would be in great pain." The Buddha smiled gently, still holding the glowing coal. "Yes, that is true. The coal would burn your hand before you ever had the chance to throw it at Devadatta. Tell me, Ananda, who suffers first from holding this hot coal? You or Devadatta?" "I would suffer first, Master," Ananda replied, beginning to understand. "And who suffers most from holding it?" the Buddha continued. "I do, Blessed One. And if you managed to throw it at Devadatta, would your hand still be burned?" "Yes, Master, my hand would be burned regardless." The Buddha carefully placed the coal back in the fire pit and turned to face Ananda fully. His eyes were filled with compassion. "Anger is like that coal, my dear student. When you hold on to anger toward another person, you are the one who gets burned first. You are the one who suffers most. And even if your anger eventually harms the other person, you have already harmed yourself in the process." The Buddha gestured for Ananda to sit beside him on a nearby bench. "For 3 weeks now, I have watched you nurture your anger toward Devadatta. During that time, who has been unable to sleep peacefully? You or Devadatta?" "I have been unable to sleep, Master," Ananda admitted quietly. "Who has lost their appetite and their joy in the morning meals?" "I have, Blessed One." "Who has been unable to focus during meditation, whose mind has been consumed with bitter thoughts and plans for revenge?" "I have," Ananda said, his voice now barely a whisper. "And during all this time," the Buddha continued, "Devadatta has gone about his days, eating, sleeping, laughing with the other monks. He has been largely unaware of your suffering. So tell me, who has been punished these past 3 weeks by your anger?" Tears began to form in Ananda's eyes as the truth became clear. "I have punished myself, Master. My anger has been my own prison." The Buddha placed a gentle hand on Ananda's shoulder. "Yes, this is the nature of anger. It is a fire that burns hottest in the heart that holds it. When you are angry at someone, you carry them with you everywhere, in your thoughts during the day, in your dreams at night. They occupy your mind without even being present. You give them power over your peace." "But Master," Ananda asked, "what should I do when someone truly wrongs me? Should I simply accept all mistreatment?" "There is a difference," the Buddha explained, "between holding anger and taking wise action. If someone's behavior is harmful, you can address it with clarity and firmness, but without the burning coal of hatred in your hand. You can set boundaries. You can speak truth. You can even walk away. But you can do all of this with a cool mind and a peaceful heart. When you hold anger, your vision becomes distorted. You see only the other person's faults and magnify them. You forget their humanity. You forget that they, too, are suffering. That they, too, make mistakes out of confusion and pain. The anger doesn't give you clarity. It clouds your judgment and leads to actions you will later regret." The Buddha looked out at the mountains in the distance. Imagine you wanted to cross those mountains to reach a beautiful valley beyond. Would you set your feet on fire before beginning the journey? Would you deliberately burn yourself, thinking it would help you travel? Ananda shook his head. "No, Master, that would be foolish. The burns would make the journey impossible." Yet this is exactly what we do when we hold anger. We burn ourselves, thinking somehow it will help us reach resolution or justice, but we only make our own journey more painful. "There is another way," the Buddha continued. "When someone troubles you, first look inward. Ask yourself, why does this bother me so deeply? What does it touch in me?" Often, what angers us in others is something we have not resolved in ourselves. Devadatta's small infractions have enraged you not because they are truly terrible, but because they trigger something within you, perhaps a need for control, or old wounds of feeling disrespected, or fear that you are not valued. Ananda sat silently, contemplating these words. The Buddha was right. His anger at Devadatta was disproportionate to the actual offenses. The real source of his suffering was within himself. When anger arises, the Buddha taught, acknowledge it. Notice it like you would notice a cloud passing in the sky. Say to yourself, anger is present, but do not pick it up like a hot coal. Do not nurture it with repetitive thoughts. Do not feed it with stories of victimhood and revenge. Let it be there and let it pass like all emotions do when we don't cling to them. Practice seeing the person who angered you with fresh eyes. Remember that they are struggling just as you are. They want to be happy just as you do. They are imperfect just as you are. This doesn't mean you must like them or spend time with them, but it means you don't have to carry the burden of hatred. Forgiveness, the Buddha said softly, is not for the other person. It is for you. It is setting down the hot coal. It is choosing not to burn anymore. Ananda bowed deeply. Thank you, Master. I see now that I have been my own torturer. I have been holding the coal while Devadatta walked free. Today, I choose to set it down. The Buddha smiled. That is wisdom, Ananda. And remember, this is not something you do once. Anger will arise again because you are human. But each time, you can choose. Will I pick up the coal, or will I let it cool where it lies? Will I burn myself, or will I remain free? From that day forward, whenever Ananda felt anger rising, he would remember the image of the hot coal. He would feel the heat in his chest and recognize it as a warning. This will burn me first. And more often than not, he would choose to set down the coal before it could scar his heart. The hot coal parable reveals a brutal truth about anger. It harms us far more than the person we're angry at. When we hold resentment, rage, or bitterness, we're clutching burning coals while hoping to hurt someone else. The irony is devastating. We suffer immediately and continuously, while the object of our anger may remain completely unaffected or unaware. This teaching doesn't ask us to become passive or accept mistreatment. Rather, it distinguishes between taking wise action and poisoning ourselves with corrosive emotions. You can address wrongdoing, set boundaries, or remove yourself from harmful situations without carrying the toxic burden of hatred. The key is responding from clarity rather than reacting from burning rage. Consider how anger functions. When you're furious, who loses sleep? Who replays the offense repeatedly? Who experiences elevated heart rate, tense muscles, stress hormones? You do. Meanwhile, the person who wronged you might be peacefully unaware, yet they've occupied your every thought. You've given them free residence in your mind while paying the rent in suffering. The liberation comes from recognizing anger when it arises, but refusing to pick it up. Acknowledge it without feeding it. See it as passing weather, present but temporary if you don't cling. Freedom means refusing to burn yourself. Story 3. The Finger Pointing at the Moon. In ancient times, a wealthy merchant's son named Subhuti came to study under a renowned Zen master. The young man was well educated, having read hundreds of Buddhist texts and scriptures. He could recite sutras perfectly, debate philosophical points with precision, and quote the Buddha's words from memory. He was proud of his knowledge and believed himself to be quite advanced on the spiritual path. On his first day at the monastery, Subhuti sat before the master, eager to demonstrate his understanding. The master, an elderly monk with kind eyes and a gentle smile, sat quietly on his cushion, simply observing the eager young man. "Master," Subhuti began confidently, "I have studied the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra. I understand the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. I can explain the concept of emptiness and the nature of dependent origination. I have come to deepen my practice with you." The master nodded slowly but said nothing. Subhuti continued, "I have questions about specific passages in the texts. For example, in the Diamond Sutra, when the Buddha says all phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, what is the precise metaphysical meaning? And how does this relate to the concept of Buddha nature?" The master remained silent for a long moment, then stood and walked to the window. It was evening, and the full moon had just risen over the mountains, casting silver light across the landscape. The master raised his arm and pointed at the moon with his index finger. "Subhuti, what do you see?" he asked. Subhuti looked at the master's hand. "I see your finger, master, pointing upward." "And what is my finger pointing at?" "The moon, master." "Good, now tell me, is my finger the moon?" Subhuti laughed. "Of course not, master. The finger merely indicates the direction of the moon. The finger is not the moon itself." "Excellent," said the master, still holding his finger toward the sky. "Now, if you wanted to understand the moon, its beauty, its light, its nature, would you study my finger? Would you measure my finger, analyze its bones and skin, debate the angle at which it points?" "No, master," Subhuti replied, still not understanding where this was leading. "That would be foolish. To know the moon, I must look at the moon itself, not at your finger." "Yet this is exactly what you are doing," the master said, turning to face Subhuti directly. "You have spent years studying the finger, the words, the texts, the concepts, the teachings. You have memorized the scriptures, analyzed the philosophies, debated the meanings. You can describe the finger in exquisite detail, but have you ever looked at the moon?" Subhuti's confident expression began to falter. The master continued, "The Buddha's words are like my finger. The scriptures are like my finger. All the teachings, all the concepts, all the philosophical explanations, they are fingers pointing at the moon. They are not the moon itself. They are tools, guides, indicators. But you, my dear student, have become so fascinated with the finger that you have forgotten to look at what it is pointing toward. The moon I speak of is direct experience, the actual taste of truth, not descriptions of truth. It is the living reality of peace, not intellectual concepts about peace. It is the immediate recognition of your true nature, not theories about Buddha nature." Subhuti sat in stunned silence. For years he had believed his extensive knowledge meant he was spiritually advanced. Now he realized he had been studying the map instead of traveling the territory. "But master," Subhuti asked humbly, "are the teachings not important? Should we not study the Buddha's words?" "The finger is useful," the master replied. "Without the finger, you might not know where to look. The teachings are valuable. They point you in the right direction. But once you see where they are pointing, you must look beyond them. You must move from knowing about truth to experiencing truth directly." Many students make your mistake. They become scholars of spirituality rather than practitioners of it. They can tell you everything about meditation, but rarely sit in actual silence. They can explain compassion perfectly, but struggle to be kind to their own family members. They can quote texts about letting go, but cling tightly to their opinions and possessions. The master sat back down. "Let me tell you a story. There was once a man dying of thirst in a desert. A kind traveler gave him a map showing where to find an oasis. The map was detailed and accurate. It showed every turn, every landmark. The thirsty man was so grateful for this beautiful map that he sat in the sand, studying it, admiring the craftsmanship, analyzing the symbols. He spent hours examining the map, praising its accuracy, showing it to other travelers, and discussing its features. Eventually, he died of thirst, still holding the perfect map, but having never walked to the water. This is what happens when we mistake the teachings for the destination. The map is not the water. The menu is not the meal. The finger is not the moon. Subhuti bowed deeply. "Master, I see my error. But how do I look at the moon? How do I move from intellectual understanding to direct experience?" "Put down your books for a moment," the master said gently. "Sit in silence, not to achieve something or become enlightened, not to fulfill what the texts say you should experience. Just sit. Watch your breath. Notice your thoughts, feel your body. Be present with what actually is, not with ideas about what should be. When you practice kindness, don't do it because the scriptures say you should. Feel the actual warmth in your heart when you help someone. When you meditate, don't do it to match some description in a sutra. Experience the actual settling of your mind, the actual spaciousness that arises. The finger says, 'Look there.' But you must do the looking. The Buddha said, "I can only point the way, you must walk the path." He gave us the finger. Now we must have the courage to look at the moon. Here is the paradox, the master continued. Once you truly see the moon, once you have direct experience of truth, you may find that the finger becomes useful again. But now you use it differently. Before, you clung to it, thinking it was the destination. Now, having seen the moon, you can appreciate the finger for what it truly is, a helpful guide, nothing more, nothing less. Many enlightened beings still read scriptures, but they read them like someone who has visited Paris reads a guidebook about Paris. It's interesting, perhaps nostalgic, maybe containing useful reminders, but fundamentally different from someone who has never been to Paris and thinks reading the guidebook is the same as visiting the city. Subhuti asked, "Master, does this mean that all my years of study were wasted?" "Not at all," the master reassured him. "The finger is not useless. You needed it to know where to look. Your studies have prepared you, given you a framework, pointed you in the right direction. But now it is time to look beyond the finger. Your knowledge can become wisdom, but only if you move from accumulating information to actually practicing and experiencing. Think of it this way. A finger pointing at the moon is helpful when it's dark and you can't see the moon. But once the dawn comes and light fills the sky, you don't need the finger anymore. You see directly. Your years of study have been the finger in darkness. Now I'm inviting you to step into the light of direct experience." The master pointed at the moon once more. The moon has been there all along. It was there before anyone pointed at it. It will be there after everyone forgets about it. It doesn't need your understanding, your approval, or your analysis. It simply is. Truth is like that moon, present, luminous, available. You don't need to earn it or deserve it or figure it out. You just need to stop staring at the finger and look up. Subhuti sat with these words for a long time. Finally he asked, "Master, how will I know when I'm looking at the moon and not just the finger?" The master smiled. "When you bite into an apple, do you need someone to tell you that you're tasting it? When you put your hand in fire, do you need confirmation that it's hot? Direct experience is self-evident. It doesn't need external validation or comparison to texts. You'll know the moon when you see it, because the knowing won't come from your head. It will come from your entire being. But I warn you, the mind is tricky. It will want to turn even the moon into another finger. After you have a moment of genuine insight, your mind may try to capture it, rename it, compare it to what you've read, turn it into another concept to possess. Be aware of this. True seeing is fresh in each moment. It cannot be grasped or stored. That night, Subhuti did something he hadn't done in years. He didn't read any scriptures. He didn't review his notes. He simply sat by the window and looked at the moon. Really looked at it. Not thinking about it. Not analyzing it. Not comparing it to descriptions he'd read. Just looking. And in that simple act of direct perception, without the filter of concepts and knowledge, something shifted. The moon was just the moon. And he was just himself, looking. No separation between observer and observed, no need for words to capture the experience. For the first time, Subhuti understood that all his knowledge had been preparation for this moment of simple, direct seeing. The finger had done its job. Now he could finally appreciate the moon. From that day forward, Subhuti approached his studies differently. He still read, still learned, still contemplated. But now he understood the purpose, not to accumulate more fingers, but to be pointed again and again toward the moon, toward direct experience, toward the living truth that cannot be fully captured in words. He had learned the most important teaching of all. The greatest wisdom is knowing the difference between the map and the territory, between the finger and the moon, between knowing about truth and living it. This parable addresses a common spiritual trap, mistaking knowledge for wisdom, words for reality, descriptions for direct experience. The Buddha's teachings, like a finger pointing at the moon, guide us toward truth, but they are not the truth itself. Many seekers become so absorbed in studying scriptures, accumulating concepts, and mastering philosophy that they never actually look at what these teachings point toward. Consider everyday manifestations. Someone reads every meditation book, yet never sits in actual silence. They explain mindfulness perfectly, but remain perpetually distracted. They quote compassion teachings while judging others harshly. Information sits in their head, disconnected from lived experience, creating spiritual intellectualism. Without actual transformation, study isn't worthless. The finger serves an important purpose. Without it, we might not know where to look. Sacred texts and wise teachers provide essential direction, but eventually we must move from accumulating pointers to following where they point, from reading about water to drinking it, from studying maps to walking the terrain. This applies beyond spirituality. You can read about love without opening your heart, study happiness without experiencing joy, analyze peace without knowing inner stillness. The liberation comes when you courageously shift from secondhand knowledge to firsthand experience. Look up from the finger and see the moon shining all along. Story 4. The Muddy Pond. There was once a successful merchant named Rahul who traveled to a remote monastery seeking peace. Despite his wealth and accomplishments, his mind was in constant turmoil. Anxious thoughts plagued him day and night, worries about business deals, regrets about past decisions, fears about the future, and an endless stream of mental chatter that gave him no rest. When Rahul arrived at the monastery, he was immediately brought before the Zen master. The master was an elderly woman known throughout the region for her profound wisdom and serene presence. Her eyes held a depth that seemed to see through all pretense. Rahul bowed respectfully and began speaking rapidly, as was his habit. "Master, I have come seeking your guidance. My mind is never at peace. Thoughts race through my head constantly. Worries, plans, regrets, judgments. I've tried everything. I've read books on meditation. I've attended workshops. I've learned breathing techniques and positive affirmations. But nothing works. My mind is like a wild horse I cannot control. Please teach me how to calm my thoughts and find peace." The master listened patiently, saying nothing. When Rahul finally finished his anxious monologue, she simply stood up and gestured for him to follow her. She led him through the monastery grounds to a small garden where there was a large earthenware jar filled with water. The water had once been clear, but sediment from the clay jar had mixed with it, making it cloudy and brown. The master picked up a long wooden stick and thrust it into the jar, stirring vigorously. The water became even murkier, thick with swirling mud and debris. She continued stirring for several moments, creating a whirlpool of cloudy chaos. "Tell me," the master said, still stirring, "what do you see?" "I see muddy water, master," Rahul replied, confused by this strange demonstration. "The water is completely murky. I cannot see through it at all. And if I asked you to make this water clear right now, what would you do?" Rahul thought for a moment. "I suppose I could filter it, or pour it out and refill the jar with fresh water, or perhaps add some purifying agent to settle the sediment." "Those might work," the master said, "but they all require adding something or doing something to the water." She pulled the stick out and set it aside. "Now, let us try a different approach. We will do nothing at all." "Nothing?" Rahul asked, perplexed. "Nothing," the master confirmed. She sat down on a nearby bench and gestured for Rahul to sit beside her. "We will simply watch." For the first few minutes, Rahul fidgeted impatiently. The water remained completely opaque, brown and murky. He couldn't understand what they were supposed to be learning by sitting and watching muddy water. "Master, forgive me, but I don't see how this—" "Watch," the master interrupted gently, her gaze fixed calmly on the jar. Rahul fell silent and tried to observe. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, he began to notice something. The furious swirling was slowing down. The violent churning of the sediment was beginning to settle. After 10 minutes, the change became more obvious. The heavier particles of mud were sinking to the bottom. The water in the upper portion of the jar was becoming clearer. After 20 minutes, the transformation was remarkable. The sediment had almost completely settled at the bottom of the jar, and the water above it was nearly transparent. You could see through it to the other side. The master turned to Rahul. "What do you observe now?" "The water has become clear," Rahul said with wonder. "Without any intervention, without adding anything or taking anything away, the mud has settled on its own, and the water has returned to clarity." "Yes," the master said. "The water's natural state is clarity. The mud was always temporary, always ready to settle. It only remained suspended because we kept stirring it." She looked directly into Rahul's eyes. "Your mind is like this water. Its natural state is clear, peaceful, and still. The thoughts, worries, and mental noise you experience are like the mud. They are not the essence of your mind, but temporary disturbances. The problem is not that you have thoughts or that your mind becomes agitated. The problem is that you keep stirring. Every time a thought arises, you grab the stick and stir. You analyze the thought. You try to push it away. You judge yourself for having it. You create elaborate strategies to control it. You worry about your worrying. All of this is stirring the water, keeping the mud suspended, maintaining the chaos." Rahul sat speechless, recognizing himself in every word. The master continued, "You said you've tried many techniques, breathing exercises, positive affirmations, mental tricks. These are all forms of stirring. You're adding more activity to an already agitated mind. You're trying to think your way out of too much thinking." "But Master," Rahul protested, "surely we must do something? We cannot simply let our minds run wild with negative thoughts and anxiety." "There is a profound difference," the master explained, "between letting your mind run wild and letting your mind settle. When you let the mind run wild, you believe every thought, follow every worry, react to every impulse. When you let the mind settle, you simply stop stirring. You observe thoughts without engaging with them. You notice anxiety without fighting it or feeding it. You sit still, inside and outside, and allow the natural settling process to occur. Think of it this way. If a small child is having a tantrum, the worst thing you can do is have a tantrum back at the child, or try to reason with them in the midst of their storm. The wise parent remains calm, provides a safe space, and allows the storm to pass naturally. Similarly, when your mind is having a tantrum of anxiety or worry, the wise response is not to fight with it or try to fix it with more mental activity. The wise response is to provide a calm, stable presence and allow the turbulence to settle on its own. "This is the essence of meditation," the master said, gesturing to the now clear water. "Not doing, but allowing. Not controlling, but settling. Not adding, but revealing what was always there." Rahul looked at the peaceful water. "But how do I practice this settling? How do I stop stirring?" "It begins with recognition," the master said. "Throughout your day, notice when you pick up the stick. Notice when you begin stirring your mental waters. It might be when you replay a conversation over and over, analyzing what you should have said. It might be when you catastrophize about the future, creating elaborate worst-case scenarios. It might be when you judge yourself harshly for feeling anxious, creating anxiety about your anxiety. When you notice yourself stirring, simply recognize, I am stirring the water. That recognition itself is the beginning of stopping. Then, gently set down the stick. This doesn't mean suppressing your thoughts or forcing yourself to stop thinking. It means stopping the additional activity of churning, analyzing, ruminating. Sit in meditation each day, the master instructed. When you sit, you will notice that your mind is muddy, full of thoughts, worries, plans. This is natural. You have been stirring for a long time, perhaps for years. The water will not become instantly clear. But here is the practice. Do not try to make it clear. Do not stir more by trying to push thoughts away. Simply sit still. Be like the jar that remains unmoving while gravity does its work. Watch your breath, not to control it, not to make it special, but simply as a place to rest your attention while the settling happens. When thoughts arise, and they will, notice them as you would notice the last few particles of mud still floating in the water. Don't stir by engaging with them. Don't stir by fighting them. Let them be there, floating, until they naturally settle. Some days the water will seem very muddy. Some days it will be clearer. This is natural. The key is not the immediate result, but the practice of not stirring. Over time, with patient practice, you will discover that your mind's natural clarity begins to reveal itself more readily. The settling happens more quickly. The periods of clear seeing become longer. The master stood and dipped her hand into the now clear water, letting it trickle through her fingers. Here's a secret. The clarity was always there, even when the water looked completely opaque. The clear water was beneath, between, and around every particle of mud. Similarly, peace is always present in you, even in the midst of anxiety. Stillness is always there, even when thoughts are racing. You are not creating peace through this practice. You are revealing the peace that is your true nature. Another secret: you don't need perfect stillness to access this peace. Even when some mud is still floating, even when thoughts are still present, you can learn to see through them, to the clarity beneath. You can learn to rest in that deeper stillness even while the surface ripples. Rahul felt something shift in his understanding. For years, he had been fighting his mind, trying to control it, judging himself when it wouldn't obey. He had seen his mental agitation as an enemy to be defeated. Now he understood it differently, as a natural disturbance that would settle on its own if he simply stopped stirring. "Master," he said quietly, "I think I have been my own worst enemy. I have created so much of my suffering by fighting with my own mind." "Yes," the master said with compassion, "and now you can create your own peace by learning this one simple practice. Stop stirring. When anxiety comes, don't stir. When worry arises, don't stir. When regret appears, don't stir. Just sit. Just breathe. Just allow. The mud will settle. The water will clear. This is not something you make happen. It is something you allow to happen." She placed her hand on Rahul's shoulder. "Practice this daily. When your mind is turbulent, remember this jar. Remember that clarity is not achieved by more effort, more striving, more doing. Clarity is revealed by less, by stillness, by patience, by trust in your mind's natural tendency toward peace. Some days you will forget and pick up the stick again. You will find yourself stirring furiously, caught in worry and rumination. When you notice this, without judgment, simply set down the stick again. Return to stillness. Return to the practice of not stirring. This is a practice of a lifetime, not a quick fix, but it is also a practice that begins to bear fruit immediately, even in your first moments of genuine stillness. Rahul bowed deeply. "Thank you, Master. I came seeking a technique to control my mind. Instead, you have taught me to stop trying to control it. I came looking for a way to force peace. Instead, you have shown me how to allow it." The master smiled. "Go now and practice. And remember, the jar does not effort to settle its water. The jar simply stops moving. You are the jar. Peace is not something you must achieve. It is something you can allow." As Rahul walked back toward the guest quarters, he felt different. His thoughts were still there. Worries about his business, plans for the future. But instead of immediately engaging with them, stirring them into a frenzy, he simply noticed them. He imagined himself as the jar, remaining still while the mud of his thoughts slowly settled. For the first time in years, Rahul glimpsed the clear water beneath the turbulence, and in that glimpse, he found the peace he had been seeking all along. This parable reveals that mental peace cannot be achieved through more effort, control, or activity. Our natural state is clarity and calm, but we obscure it by constantly stirring our minds through rumination, worry, analysis, and resistance. The mud represents thoughts and emotions, not inherently problematic, but overwhelming when kept in constant agitation through our reactions. Most people approach mental turmoil by trying harder, doing more, seeking techniques to forcefully calm the mind. But this approach is itself stirring. When anxious, fighting anxiety creates anxiety about anxiety. When thoughts race and you struggle to control them, you add more mental activity to an already busy mind. like calming troubled water by splashing it vigorously. The wisdom lies in non-interference. Just as muddy water clears when undisturbed, your mind naturally settles into peace when you stop churning it with reactions and judgments. This doesn't mean passive suffering or mental chaos. It means observing without engaging. When worried thoughts appear, don't follow their catastrophic path, nor fight to push them away. Let them be there, trusting they'll settle naturally. This requires radical shift. Some transformations happen through allowing rather than doing. The jar doesn't make water clear. It provides stillness for clarity to emerge. Similarly, meditation creates conditions for your inherent peace to reveal itself. When churning with worry, recognize your stirring, then gently set down the stick. Story 5. The Hidden Jewel. Long ago, there lived a young man named Kisa who felt deeply inadequate. Though he came from a good family and had received education, he saw himself as worthless compared to others. He watched successful merchants and thought, "I could never achieve such wealth." He observed scholars and thought, "I could never possess such knowledge." He saw spiritual practitioners and thought, "I could never attain such wisdom." Kisa spent his days working as a laborer, barely earning enough to survive. At night, he would lie awake, consumed by feelings of inferiority and self-doubt. "I am nothing special," he told himself repeatedly. "I have no remarkable talents, no unique gifts, no important purpose." One day, feeling particularly despondent, Kisa decided to visit a monastery he had heard about. Perhaps, he thought, the monks there could help him find some meaning in his miserable existence. When he arrived, he was directed to the abbot, an elderly monk with penetrating eyes that seemed to see into one's soul. Kisa bowed low and poured out his troubles. "Venerable sir, I am a worthless person. I have no special abilities, no achievements to speak of. I look at others and see their success, their talents, their purpose, and I have none of these things. I feel empty, as if I were born without the gifts that others possess. Can you tell me what I should do? How can someone like me, who has nothing, find meaning in life?" The abbot listened quietly, his expression compassionate but unreadable. When Kisa finished speaking, the monk stood up without a word and gestured for him to follow. They walked through the monastery grounds to a small, simple room where travelers sometimes stayed. The abbot pointed to an old, worn traveling cloak hanging on a peg. "Is that your cloak?" the abbot asked. "Yes, venerable sir," Kisa replied, confused by the question. "Would you bring it here, please?" Kisa took down the cloak and handed it to the abbot. The old monk examined it carefully, running his hands over the rough fabric, checking the seams and pockets. "This is a very poor garment," the abbot observed. "Full of patches, threadbare in places. You must be quite destitute to wear such a thing." Kisa felt shame wash over him. Even his clothing revealed his worthlessness. The abbot continued his examination, and then suddenly his fingers stopped at a small inner pocket that had been sewn shut and hidden in the lining. With careful movements, he unpicked the stitches and reached inside. From the hidden pocket, he withdrew a large, brilliant jewel that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. It was a gem of extraordinary size and clarity, worth a fortune beyond imagination. Kisa stared in absolute shock. What is that? How did that get there?" The abbot held the jewel up to the light. "This has been in your possession all along. Tell me, how long have you owned this cloak?" "It was my father's," Kisa stammered. "He gave it to me before he died many years ago, but I never knew, I never saw." "You wore this cloak every day," the abbot said gently. "You traveled in it, worked in it, slept in it. All this time, you carried this priceless jewel with you. Yet you thought yourself poor. You believed you had nothing of value. You saw yourself as empty-handed, while abundance was literally wrapped around your shoulders." The abbot handed the jewel to Kisa, who took it with trembling hands, still unable to fully comprehend what was happening. "But why?" Kisa asked. "Why would my father hide it? Why wouldn't he tell me?" "Perhaps he intended to tell you but died before he could. the abbot suggested. Or perhaps he wanted you to discover it yourself when the time was right. But the why doesn't matter now. What matters is this. You have spent years believing yourself to be poor, worthless, empty-handed. You have suffered from a poverty that never existed. You have lived as a beggar while carrying the wealth of a king. The abbot sat down and motioned for Kisa to sit beside him. Now, let me tell you the deeper truth that this jewel represents. The gem you found in your cloak is remarkable. Yes, it can change your material circumstances, bring you comfort and security. But there is another jewel, infinitely more precious, that you also carry without knowing it. Kisa looked at the abbot with questioning eyes. Within you, the abbot continued, hidden like this jewel was hidden in your cloak, is your Buddha nature. It is your true essence, pure awareness, inherent wisdom, the capacity for complete peace and understanding. Every human being carries this treasure. It is not something you earn or develop. It is not a reward for good behavior or spiritual achievement. It is already there, already complete, already perfect. But Venerable Sir, Kisa protested, I am no one special. I have no spiritual gifts. I am just an ordinary, unremarkable person. And that is exactly the point, the abbot said with a gentle smile. This jewel of Buddha nature is not special in the sense of being rare or exceptional. It is universal. Every person has it. The beggar and the king, the wise and the foolish, the saint and the criminal, all possess this same treasure. The only difference is that some people have discovered it, while others, like you until today, live their entire lives not knowing what they carry. Think about your life these past years. You have been like a man dying of thirst while carrying a water flask, simply because you didn't know the flask was there. You have starved while carrying bread in your pocket. You have suffered from a poverty that was purely imaginary. The abbot leaned forward. Tell me, Kisa, now that you've discovered the jewel in your cloak, has it changed the jewel itself? Has it become more valuable now that you know about it? No, Venerable Sir. The jewel was always valuable. My knowledge of it doesn't change what it is. Exactly. And the same is true of your Buddha nature, your essential worth, your inherent completeness. It has been there all along. When you felt worthless, it was still there. When you compared yourself to others and found yourself lacking, it was still there. When you suffered from feelings of inadequacy, it was still there. Whole, perfect, unchanged your opinions about yourself. Your suffering came not from lacking this treasure, but from not knowing you had it. You created an entire identity based on poverty. I am worthless, I am inadequate, I have nothing, while the whole time you were complete. Kisa felt tears forming in his eyes. Years of self-judgment and suffering suddenly seemed so unnecessary, so based on a fundamental misunderstanding. But Venerable Sir, how do I access this Buddha nature? How do I use it, like I can use this jewel to change my circumstances? The abbot shook his head gently. This is where the metaphor becomes tricky. The jewel in your cloak is something you possess and can use. But Buddha nature is not something you possess. It is what you are. You don't access it or use it. You recognize it. You stop believing the false story of inadequacy and see your true nature. Here is a better way to understand it. Imagine you are a prince who, as an infant, was lost and raised by peasants. You grow up believing you are a peasant, working in the fields, living in poverty, seeing yourself as low-born. Then one day, someone reveals your true identity. You discover you are actually royalty. Now, has anything about your essential nature changed? No, you were always the prince, but your life will transform completely because now you know who you truly are. Most people live their entire lives as princes who believe they are beggars. They have access to infinite inner resources, peace, wisdom, compassion, joy, but they don't know these resources are there, so they live in artificial scarcity. They seek externally for what they already possess internally. You came here today asking how someone like you, someone with nothing, can find meaning in life. But you have been asking the wrong question. The right question is not, how can I, who am empty, become full? The right question is, How can I recognize the fullness that is already present? How can I discover the jewel I have been carrying all along? Kisa sat in silence, absorbing these words. Something was shifting in his understanding, like a door opening to a room he didn't know existed. The practical path, the abbot continued, is to stop searching externally for worth and start recognizing it internally. Stop comparing yourself to others as if worth were a competition. Stop trying to earn value through achievements and accomplishments. These things are fine: work, success, contribution, but they don't create your worth. They are expressions of it, not sources of it. Practice meditation. In stillness, you can begin to sense what lies beneath all your thoughts about yourself, beneath all the self-judgment, the comparing, the striving. There, in that deeper place, you will discover what has always been present: a quiet knowing, an inherent okayness, a fundamental completeness that needs nothing added to it. When feelings of inadequacy arise, and they will because old habits of mind are strong, remember this jewel. Remember that what you seek is already present. You are not trying to become something you're not. You are simply recognizing what you already are. The abbot stood and placed his hand on Kisa's shoulder. You walk through our gates today, believing yourself to be empty-handed and worthless. You are leaving with a jewel of great material value. But more importantly, you are leaving with the knowledge that you have never, for one single moment of your existence, been without treasure. The jewel was always there. Your worth was always there. Your completeness was always there. Go now and live from this recognition. When you catch yourself thinking, "I am not enough," remember the cloak. When you compare yourself to others and feel less than, remember the hidden pocket. When you seek externally for what can only be found internally, remember this day. And know this: thousands of people walk through life wearing cloaks with hidden jewels, never discovering them. You have been given the gift of discovery. Don't waste it by forgetting. Don't fall back into the old story of poverty. You are not what you thought you were. You are so much more. Kisa bowed deeply, holding the precious jewel in one hand and feeling, for the first time in his life, a sense of his own preciousness in his heart. As he left the monastery that day, Kisa looked at the people he passed on the road with new eyes. The farmers working in the fields, the merchants in their shops, the beggars by the roadside. All of them, he realized, were walking around in their own cloaks, carrying their own hidden jewels, most of them completely unaware of what they possessed. And he understood. The greatest poverty is not lack of material wealth, but lack of self-knowledge. The greatest treasure is not what we can acquire, but recognizing what we have never been without. From that day forward, Kisa's outer life did change. The material jewel brought him security and comfort. But the deeper transformation came from the inner recognition. He was not, and had never been, the worthless person he had believed himself to be. The jewel had been in his pocket all along, and it had been waiting patiently to be discovered. This parable speaks to one of humanity's deepest wounds: the belief that we are fundamentally inadequate, incomplete, or lacking in some essential way. Like Kisa wearing a cloak with a hidden jewel while believing himself poor, most people live their entire lives unaware of their inherent worth and completeness. We create elaborate identities built on scarcity. I'm not smart enough, successful enough, spiritual enough, while carrying within us everything we've been seeking. The Buddha's teaching of Buddha nature points to this truth. Your essential worth is not something you earn through achievements or develop through spiritual practice. It's already present, already complete, simply waiting to be recognized. This isn't positive thinking or self-help affirmation. It's recognizing what has always been true. Just as discovering the jewel didn't make it valuable, it was always valuable. Recognizing your Buddha nature doesn't create your worth. It reveals what was always there. Most suffering stems from this fundamental misidentification. We believe we're beggars who must earn our place, prove our value, justify our existence. This creates endless striving, seeking validation through success, relationships, achievements, or spiritual attainment. We exhaust ourselves trying to become worthy, never realizing we're already complete. It's like searching everywhere for glasses that are on your head. The practical application is profound yet simple. Stop seeking externally for worth that can only be recognized internally. When inadequacy arises, remember the hidden jewel. You're not trying to become something you're not. You're recognizing what you already are. The treasure was in your pocket all along. Story 6. The Two Wolves. In a small village at the foot of a great mountain, there lived a wise grandmother who was known throughout the region for her deep understanding of human nature. People came from far and wide to seek her counsel on matters of the heart and spirit. One evening, her young grandson came to her, his face twisted with anger and hurt. He had been in a conflict with a friend at school, a boy who had betrayed his trust, spread lies about him, and turned other children against him. The grandson's hands were clenched into fists, and tears of rage and pain streamed down his face. "Grandmother," he said, his voice shaking, "I hate him. He has hurt me so deeply. I think about what he did all day and all night. I imagine ways to get revenge, to make him feel the pain he caused me. Sometimes I dream of hurting him back, of ruining his reputation the way he ruined mine. But then I also remember the times we were friends, and I feel sad and confused. These feelings are tearing me apart. I don't know what to do with all this anger and hurt." The grandmother listened patiently, her weathered face calm and compassionate. When her grandson finished, she gestured for him to sit beside her, near the fire that crackled in the hearth. "My dear child," she began, her voice soft but clear, "I understand your pain. What you're experiencing is something every human being faces throughout their life. Let me tell you something that my grandmother told me when I was your age, and her grandmother told her, passed down through generations." She poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing up into the darkness. "Inside each of us, there are two wolves engaged in a constant battle. This battle happens in every person's heart, in yours, in mine, in your friends, in every human being who has ever lived." The boy leaned closer, intrigued despite his anger. "The first wolf," the grandmother continued, "represents all the difficult, painful, and destructive qualities of human nature. This wolf is anger, like what you feel now toward your friend. It is resentment that gnaws at your peace. It is envy that makes you bitter when others succeed. It is greed that always wants more, never satisfied. It is ego that must always be right, always superior. It is self-pity that makes you see yourself as a victim. It is lies and deception. It is cruelty and the desire for revenge. It is fear that keeps you small. It is arrogance that blinds you to your own faults." The grandmother paused, letting her words sink in, then continued. "The second wolf represents the beautiful, noble, and creative qualities we're all capable of. This wolf is love, the genuine care for others and yourself. It is joy that arises naturally from a peaceful heart. It is peace itself, the calm that comes from knowing you're enough. It is hope that sees possibility even in darkness. It is humility that can learn from anyone and admit mistakes. It is kindness that extends compassion even to those who hurt you. It is generosity that gives without expecting return. It is truth and integrity. It is courage to face fear and do what's right anyway. It is compassion that understands everyone is struggling." The boy sat silently, watching the flames dance. He could feel both wolves in himself, the one that wanted to hurt his friend back and the one that remembered their friendship with sadness. "Grandmother," he finally asked, "which wolf wins?" The old woman looked into her grandson's eyes with profound love and understanding. The firelight reflected in her wise, ancient eyes. "The one you feed," she said simply. The boy looked confused. "Feed? What do you mean?" "Think of it this way," the grandmother explained. "Right now, you're feeding the wolf of anger. Every time you replay what your friend did, you're feeding it. Every time you imagine revenge, you're feeding it. Every time you tell someone the story of how you were wronged, nursing your sense of victimhood, you're feeding it. Every thought of hatred is like throwing meat to that wolf, making it stronger, more dominant, more in control of your actions. When you feed the angry wolf, it grows large and powerful. It begins to control your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior. You become the anger. You can't sleep well because the angry wolf prowls your dreams. You can't enjoy time with other friends because the angry wolf colors everything with bitterness. You can't focus on your studies because the angry wolf keeps demanding your attention, replaying the hurt over and over. The boy recognized this. He had indeed been consumed by these very patterns. The angry wolf is clever, the grandmother continued. It tells you that your anger is justified, that you have every right to feel this way, that you'd be weak if you let it go. It tells you that revenge would feel good, that holding on to your hurt protects you somehow. It whispers that if you stop being angry, you're letting your friend win. The angry wolf makes you believe that your anger serves you, when in truth, it only imprisons you. But here's what the angry wolf doesn't tell you. While you're feeding it, you're starving the other wolf. While you're consumed with thoughts of revenge, you're not feeling joy. While you're replaying the betrayal, you're not experiencing peace. While you're hardening your heart against your friend, you're also hardening it against everyone else, including yourself. The boy felt a knot in his stomach. He could see how his anger had made him irritable with his parents, dismissive of his other friends, and unable to enjoy things he usually loved. So what do I do, grandmother? How do I stop feeding the angry wolf? First, she said, understand that the angry wolf is not your enemy. Both wolves are part of your nature. The angry wolf has its place. Anger can alert you when boundaries are violated, when injustice occurs, when something needs to change. The problem isn't that the angry wolf exists. The problem is when you feed it so much that it dominates everything else. The practice is to consciously choose which wolf you feed. When you notice yourself replaying the hurt, stop and redirect your attention to something else. Perhaps something you're grateful for. When you catch yourself planning revenge, stop and do an act of kindness for someone else. When you start telling the story of betrayal again, stop and instead tell a story of a time you were helped or forgiven. But grandmother, the boy protested, isn't that just pretending? The hurt is real. The betrayal happened. How can I just ignore it? I'm not asking you to ignore it or pretend it didn't happen, the grandmother replied. I'm asking you to choose what you do with it. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, your friend betrayed you. These are facts, but what you do with these facts, that's where your power lies. You can feed the angry wolf by making this betrayal the center of your existence, letting it poison your days and nights. Or you can feed the wolf of wisdom by learning from this experience, perhaps learning to choose friends more carefully, or to trust more slowly, or to recognize warning signs. You can feed the wolf of compassion by considering that your friend must be suffering too. Happy, peaceful people don't betray others. You can feed the wolf of strength by deciding that this experience, painful as it is, won't define you or make you bitter. You can even feed the wolf of forgiveness, not because your friend deserves it, but because you deserve to be free from the weight of carrying this anger. The boy sat quietly, considering this. But what if I try to feed the good wolf and the angry wolf is still there? What if I still feel angry? The angry wolf will still be there, the grandmother acknowledged. You may feel angry for some time. That's natural and human. The question isn't whether you feel anger. The question is whether you feed it or starve it. Each time you choose not to rehearse your revenge fantasies, you're starving the angry wolf a little. Each time you choose to do something kind instead of something cruel, you're feeding the wolf of love. Over time, and this takes time, not instant results, the wolf you feed becomes stronger and the wolf you starve becomes weaker. If you consistently feed the wolf of anger, you'll become an angry person. Your face will show it. Your relationships will reflect it. Your health will suffer from it. You'll attract more experiences that confirm your belief that the world is hostile and people can't be trusted. But if you consistently feed the wolf of love, kindness, and peace, you'll become that. Your face will show it in softness and warmth. Your relationships will deepen. Your health will improve. You'll attract experiences that confirm your belief that life, despite its challenges, holds beauty and possibility. The grandmother added more wood to the fire. Here's something important to understand. Feeding the good wolf doesn't mean becoming weak or passive. The wolf of love includes courage. The wolf of peace includes strength. You can set boundaries with your friend, decide not to trust him again, and choose to spend time with other people, all while feeding the wolf of wisdom rather than the wolf of revenge. In fact, feeding the good wolf often requires more courage than feeding the angry one. It's easy to be angry and bitter. That's the path of least resistance. It takes real strength to choose kindness when you've been hurt, to choose peace when you have justification for war, to choose love when you have permission to hate. Let me tell you something else, the grandmother continued. Every person you meet is also fighting this battle between their two wolves. Your friend who betrayed you, he has two wolves too. When he spread those lies about you, he was feeding his wolf of fear, insecurity, and cruelty. Perhaps his angry wolf told him that hurting you would make him feel powerful, or that bringing you down would lift him up. When you understand this, it becomes easier to have compassion. Not compassion that excuses wrong behavior, but compassion that understands we all struggle with these same inner forces. When someone is cruel to you, you can recognize their angry wolf is in control right now. You don't have to let their angry wolf awaken yours. You can respond from your wolf of wisdom instead. The boy was beginning to understand. So when I'm angry at him, I'm actually letting his angry wolf control my angry wolf? Exactly, the grandmother said with a smile. His angry wolf is trying to provoke your angry wolf into a fight. But you have a choice. You can decline the invitation. You can say, "No, I won't feed my angry wolf just because yours is hungry." This is true power, my grandson. Not the power to hurt others back, but the power to choose your own response, to decide which wolf you'll feed regardless of what others do. This is freedom, not being controlled by circumstances or other people's behavior, but choosing from your own center which qualities you'll cultivate. The fire crackled between them as they sat in comfortable silence. The boy felt something shifting in his chest, the tight knot of anger beginning to loosen just a little. "Grandmother," he said finally, "I think I understand, but it's hard. When I think about what happened, I still feel angry." "Of course you do," she said warmly, "and that's okay. You don't have to be perfect at this. The practice is simply to notice, which wolf am I feeding right now? And then, with gentleness toward yourself, make a choice. Sometimes you'll feed the angry wolf. You're human. But each time you notice and choose differently, you're practicing. You're training yourself. Over time, it becomes easier. Think of it like this. You have two dogs, and you feed one twice a day with the best food. Give it exercise, pet it, play with it. The other dog you ignore, never feed, never interact with. After a few months, which dog will be stronger and more present in your life?" The boy nodded, understanding the metaphor completely. "Before you go to sleep each night," the grandmother suggested, "review your day and ask yourself, which wolf did I feed today? Not with judgment, just with awareness. When did I feed the angry wolf? When did I feed the loving wolf?" This practice of awareness itself will help you make better choices. And remember, feeding the loving wolf doesn't mean you'll never feel anger, sadness, or hurt. These feelings are part of being human. But you can feel these things without letting them control you, without feeding them until they consume everything else. The boy stood up and hugged his grandmother. "Thank you, grandmother. I'm still hurt by what happened, but I feel a little lighter now. I'm going to try to feed the wolf of peace instead of the wolf of anger." "That's all anyone can do," she said, holding him close. "Try, notice, choose again. One moment at a time, one choice at a time, and be patient with yourself. You're learning a skill that will serve you for your entire life." As the boy walked home under the stars, he became aware of his thoughts in a new way. When his mind started to replay his friend's betrayal, he recognized, "I'm about to feed the angry wolf." And sometimes he still did. The habit was strong. But other times, he consciously shifted his attention to the stars above, to his grandmother's wisdom, to gratitude for having learned something important. He was beginning to understand that he had more power than he'd realized. Not power over others or external circumstances, but power over which inner qualities he would cultivate and strengthen. The two wolves would always be there, but now he knew. He got to choose which one would lead his life. This ancient parable illuminates a fundamental truth about human nature and personal transformation. We contain multitudes of potential qualities, both destructive and creative, and we become whatever we consistently nurture. The two wolves represent the competing impulses within every person. One pulling toward fear, anger, resentment, and separation. The other toward love, compassion, courage, and connection. The crucial insight is that neither wolf disappears, but whichever one receives your attention, energy, and reinforcement grows stronger and more influential in your life. Most people don't realize they're actively choosing which wolf to feed. When hurt, they automatically rehearse grievances, plot revenge, nurse resentments, feeding the angry wolf without conscious decision. They believe their negativity is justified, that circumstances force their response. But this parable reveals our agency. You can acknowledge pain without feeding anger, recognize injustice without feeding hatred, experience hurt without feeding bitterness. The difference between wisdom and suffering often comes down to which internal tendency you strengthen through repetition. This isn't positive thinking or denial of difficulty. Both wolves exist, both have their place. Anger can signal boundary violations. Fear can alert you to danger. The question isn't eliminating these qualities, but choosing what dominates your inner landscape. When you repeatedly feed anger through rumination and revenge fantasies, you become an angry person. It shapes your face, relationships, health, and life trajectory. When you repeatedly feed compassion, gratitude, and peace, you become that instead. The practical application is moment-by-moment awareness. Notice which wolf you're currently feeding. Then choose, not perfectly, not always successfully, but consciously. Over time, this practice rewires your default responses and transforms who you become. Story 7. The Two Hands. In the time of the Buddha, there was a successful landowner named Ajita who came to the monastery troubled by a business dispute. A neighboring merchant had cheated him out of a considerable sum of money through deception and false contracts. Ajita was consumed with thoughts of how to retaliate, how to damage the merchant's reputation, and how to recover not just his money, but his dignity. He found the Buddha sitting under a Bodhi tree, surrounded by several monks who were listening to his teachings. Ajita waited impatiently for a break in the discourse, then burst forward with his grievance. "Blessed One," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage, "I have been deeply wronged by a dishonest merchant. He has stolen from me through lies and manipulation. I have the resources to destroy his business, to ruin his name throughout the region. I can make him suffer as he has made me suffer. Surely justice demands that I strike back. Surely he must face consequences for his actions." The Buddha looked at Ajita with eyes full of compassion and understanding. He said nothing for a moment, simply observing the man's agitation, his clenched jaw, his rigid posture. Then, without a word, the Buddha raised his right hand and slapped his own left hand sharply. The sound echoed in the quiet grove. The monks and Ajita watched in confusion. What was the Blessed One doing? The Buddha looked at his left hand with an expression of mock concern. Then he turned to his right hand and addressed it sternly. "You struck my left hand. This is unacceptable. You have caused injury and pain. Now, left hand, you must retaliate. Strike back. Hit the right hand as it hit you. Justice demands revenge." He paused, looking at his left hand as if waiting for it to act. Nothing happened, of course. The left hand remained still. The Buddha then looked up at Ajita with a gentle smile. How strange. My left hand refuses to strike back. Why do you think that is? Ajita was perplexed. Blessed One, I don't understand. Your hands are both part of your body. It would be foolish for the left hand to strike the right hand. It would only be hurting yourself. Ah, the Buddha said softly, you understand perfectly when it comes to hands. Now tell me, are you and this merchant not both part of the same body? Ajita's face showed confusion. But we are separate people, Blessed One. We are not connected like your two hands. The Buddha lowered his hands to his lap. Are you certain of that? Let me ask you something. When you hurt this merchant, if you destroy his business, ruin his reputation, cause suffering to him and his family, do you believe you remain untouched? Do you think you can harm another without harming yourself? He deserves it, Ajita protested. He wronged me first. Perhaps he does deserve consequences, the Buddha agreed. But that is not what I asked. I asked whether you can harm him without harming yourself. Answer truthfully. When you plot your revenge, how do you feel? When you imagine his suffering, does your heart feel peaceful or agitated? When you spend your days planning his destruction, is your mind clear or clouded? Ajita was quiet for a moment. Truthfully, the obsession with revenge had robbed him of sleep, peace, and joy. His relationships with his family had suffered because he was always distracted, always angry. He had lost his appetite and his ability to focus on anything else. I have not been at peace, he admitted reluctantly. And if you succeed in destroying him, the Buddha continued, will you find peace then? Or will you carry the weight of having caused suffering? Will you be able to look at his children and feel no remorse? Will you sleep better knowing you've added more pain to the world? The Buddha gestured to his hands again. When the right hand struck the left hand, both hands belong to me. The pain in the left hand is my pain. If the left hand strikes back, the pain in the right hand is also my pain. No matter which hand suffers, I suffer. There is no victory in one part of my body attacking another part. Now expand this understanding. All beings are connected like parts of one body. We are not as separate as we imagine. When you were cheated by this merchant, did it affect only you? Or did it ripple outward, affecting your family, your workers, your own peace of mind? And if you retaliate, will it affect only him? Or will the suffering ripple outward to his family, his workers, and back to your own peace of mind? One of the monks, a young man named Ananda, spoke up respectfully. But Blessed One, if someone wrongs us, should we simply accept it? Should we take no action? Doesn't that encourage more wrongdoing? An excellent question, the Buddha replied. I am not saying to take no action. I am saying that whatever action you take, remember, you are dealing with a part of the larger body of humanity, not a completely separate enemy. My left hand does not strike back at my right hand, but that doesn't mean I do nothing. If my right hand acts harmfully, I might restrain it. I might understand what caused it to lash out. Perhaps it was startled, perhaps it was in pain itself. I address the root cause with wisdom, not with more violence. The Buddha looked at Ajita directly. You can seek fair compensation for what was taken from you. You can protect yourself from future harm. You can expose dishonest practices to protect others. But you can do all of this without hatred, without the desire to cause suffering for suffering's sake. You can act from wisdom rather than from revenge. When you seek to harm another out of revenge, you're like the left hand striking the right hand. You may feel temporarily satisfied, but you have only added to the total amount of pain in the body, and that pain is never truly separate from you. Ajita sat down heavily on the ground, his anger beginning to dissolve into something else, perhaps sadness, perhaps understanding. But Blessed One, he may never change. He may continue to cheat others. He may never face consequences. Perhaps, the Buddha acknowledged, but that is his burden to carry, his karma to face. Your burden is to decide what kind of person you will be in response to his actions. Will you become like him, willing to harm others for your own satisfaction? Or will you respond with wisdom, protecting yourself and others without adding more suffering to the world? Consider this. Right now, you are connected to him through hatred. Your mind thinks of him constantly. Your emotions are controlled by what he did. In a sense, you have given him tremendous power over your inner life. He occupies your thoughts without even being present. This is not freedom. This is bondage. But if you release the need for revenge, if you take practical steps to protect yourself without hatred, you cut that cord. You reclaim your peace. You are no longer bound to him through resentment. He becomes irrelevant to your inner state. The Buddha held up both hands again, palms facing Ajita. Look at these hands. They are different, right and left, each with its own function. They sometimes disagree about which hand should do what task, but they do not see each other as enemies. They understand they are part of one body, one life, one existence. This is how wise people see all beings. Yes, we are different. Yes, we sometimes harm each other out of ignorance or pain, but we are not truly separate. Your suffering affects me. My suffering affects you. We are all hands of the same body, the body of humanity, the body of life itself. When you understand this deeply, not just intellectually but in your heart, revenge becomes impossible. How can you seek revenge against yourself? How can you rejoice in harming a part of your own body? Ajita felt tears forming in his eyes. But Blessed One, what about justice? What about fairness? Should wrong actions have no consequences? I did not say there should be no consequences, the Buddha replied gently. Natural consequences exist. The merchant who cheats will eventually lose the trust of others. His own mind will suffer from the guilt and fear of being discovered. He creates his own suffering through his actions. You don't need to add to it. But more importantly, true justice comes from understanding, not from revenge. If you want to create justice in the world, work to create systems and communities where honesty is rewarded and dishonesty has clear, fair consequences. Educate people about integrity. Model trustworthiness yourself. This creates lasting change. Revenge, on the other hand, creates only a cycle. He harms you, you harm him back, he or his allies harm you again, and on and on. It's like two hands in an eternal fight, each justifying its violence by pointing to the other's actions. The cycle only breaks when someone has the wisdom to say, I will not perpetuate this. I will not add more pain to the body we share. The Buddha lowered his hands and folded them peacefully in his lap. Ajita, you came here wanting me to justify your revenge, to give you permission to harm another. But I cannot do that. What I can offer you is freedom. Freedom from the prison of hatred, freedom from being controlled by another's actions, freedom from becoming someone you would not want to be. When you leave here today, you have a choice. You can continue to see this merchant as your enemy, separate from you, deserving of your wrath. Or you can begin to see him as a confused, suffering person who, like you, wants happiness but sometimes acts unskillfully in trying to find it. You can protect yourself from him while still recognizing his humanity. Remember, every person who has ever harmed you is someone's beloved child, someone's dear friend, someone who was once an innocent baby. They have known love, fear, hope, and pain just as you have. They make mistakes just as you do. When you keep this perspective, it becomes harder to dehumanize them, harder to wish them suffering. Ananda, who had been listening intently, asked another question. Blessed One, does this mean we should love our enemies? How is that possible when they have hurt us? You need not feel warm affection for those who harm you, the Buddha replied. But you can recognize that harming them harms the whole, which includes you. You can wish for their transformation rather than their destruction. You can hope they find wisdom rather than suffering. This is not for their sake. It is for yours. It is for the sake of the whole body we all share. Think of it this way. If your hand develops a disease, you don't hate the hand or seek to destroy it. You try to heal it. You recognize it's part of you and work to restore its health. Similarly, when someone acts harmfully, they are like a diseased part of the social body. The wise response is to work toward healing through education, consequences that teach rather than merely punish, and opportunities for growth and change. Ajita sat in silence for a long time, absorbing these teachings. Finally he spoke, his voice softer now. "Blessed One, I see the truth in what you say, but I feel afraid. If I don't strike back, won't I be seen as weak? Won't others take advantage of me?" "There is nothing weak about wisdom," the Buddha assured him. "It takes far more strength to restrain yourself from revenge than to indulge in it. Anyone can hate. It requires no skill, no discipline, no courage. But to protect yourself without hatred, to seek justice without revenge, to maintain your own peace despite being wronged, this requires the strength of a true warrior. And no, you won't be taken advantage of if you're wise. Wisdom means protecting yourself, setting clear boundaries, and not tolerating harmful behavior. But it means doing all of this from a place of clarity rather than rage, from understanding rather than hatred. People respect this kind of strength far more than they respect the strength of someone who lashes out in anger." The Buddha stood and placed his hand on Ajita's shoulder. "Go now and consider what I have shown you. Look at your two hands and remember, they are different but not separate, distinct but not divided. Let this be your guide in how you see all beings. And ask yourself this question: at the end of your life, do you want to be someone who added suffering to the world because you felt justified in doing so, or someone who, despite being wronged, chose to break the cycle and respond with wisdom?" Ajita bowed deeply. "Thank you, Blessed One. I came here seeking permission for revenge. Instead, you have given me something far more valuable: freedom from the need for it." As Ajita walked away from the monastery, he looked at his own two hands. He thought about all the times in his life when one part of him had been at war with another part. His desires fighting his values, his anger fighting his compassion, his fear fighting his courage. He realized that the external conflicts in his life often mirrored these internal divisions, and he understood. The path to peace in the world begins with recognizing that we are not as separate as we believe. Every act of revenge against another is, in some way, an act of violence against ourselves. Every act of compassion toward another is, in some way, an act of healing for ourselves. The two hands belong to one body, and all of us ultimately belong to one another. This parable reveals a profound truth that transforms how we understand conflict and connection. We are not as separate from others as we imagine, and harming another ultimately harms ourselves. The Buddha's demonstration with his two hands illustrates that causing suffering to someone else, even someone who has wronged us, is like one part of our body attacking another part. The satisfaction of revenge is illusory. We only add to the total suffering in a system we're intrinsically part of. Most people operate from a fundamental assumption of separation. I am here, you are there. We are entirely distinct entities with no real connection. This assumption makes revenge seem logical. If we're truly separate, then harming you doesn't affect me. But this parable challenges that premise. When you destroy another person's life through revenge, do you remain untouched? The answer is always no. The hatred you cultivate poisons your own mind. The time you spend plotting revenge is time stolen from your own peace and joy. The person you become in seeking vengeance is someone you often later regret being. This teaching doesn't ask for passive acceptance of wrongdoing or naive vulnerability to harm. You can protect yourself, seek fair restitution, and establish boundaries, all without hatred. The difference is approaching conflict from wisdom rather than revenge, from understanding our interconnection rather than emphasizing our separation. When you recognize that causing suffering creates ripples that ultimately touch you, revenge loses its appeal. You begin to seek solutions that minimize total suffering rather than solutions that satisfy your ego's demand for retribution. The practical application is revolutionary. Before acting on the impulse to harm someone who has harmed you, pause and recognize that you're part of the same body of humanity. Ask yourself not, what does this person deserve, but what kind of person do I want to become in response to this situation? Choose actions that protect without poisoning your own heart with hatred. Story 8. The Golden Cup. There once was a powerful and devout king named Prasenajit who ruled a prosperous kingdom. Though he had everything a person could want, wealth, power, a loving family, and the respect of his people, he felt something was missing. He had heard of the Buddha's teachings and felt drawn to them, sensing they held the key to a deeper peace he had not yet found. One day, the king decided to visit the Buddha at his monastery. To show his devotion and respect, he commissioned the royal goldsmiths to create the most magnificent offering ever made, a golden cup of extraordinary beauty, encrusted with precious gems worth more than a small palace. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate patterns representing the wheel of Dharma, lotus flowers, and sacred symbols. The king had the cup placed in a silk-lined chest and carried by his most trusted attendants. He traveled with a grand procession to the monastery, eager to present this precious gift to the enlightened one. When the king arrived, the Buddha was sitting peacefully under a tree, surrounded by his monks. The king approached with great ceremony, his attendants carrying the magnificent golden cup. The king bowed deeply, then gestured for the attendants to bring forward the chest. With reverent hands, the king himself lifted the golden cup from its silk cushion. It caught the sunlight and seemed to glow with an inner radiance. The precious stones sparkled brilliantly. It was, without question, one of the most valuable objects anyone had ever seen. "Blessed One," the king said, his voice filled with emotion, "I have come to offer you this humble gift as a symbol of my devotion to the Dharma. This cup represents my deepest respect for your teachings and my sincere wish to support your work. Please accept it with my wholehearted reverence." The king held out the magnificent cup toward the Buddha, expecting the teacher to receive it with gratitude and perhaps some words of blessing. The Buddha looked at the cup, then at the king, his expression serene and unchanging. After a moment of silence, he spoke one word: "Release." The king hesitated, confused. Release? Did the Buddha want him to place it on the ground? He began to lower the cup, preparing to set it down gently. "No," the Buddha said softly, "let go." The king understood. The Buddha wanted him to actually release the cup, to let it fall. But this seemed almost sacrilegious. To drop such a precious object, crafted with such care and devotion, worth so much. Surely the Buddha didn't mean literally let it fall? But the Buddha's gaze was steady and clear. He meant exactly what he said. With trembling hands and a confused heart, the king opened his fingers and released the golden cup. It fell to the ground with a heavy thud, denting slightly and losing one of its precious stones, which rolled away into the grass. The king's attendants gasped. Some of the monks looked surprised. The king himself felt a strange mixture of shock, loss, and confusion. That cup had been so precious, so carefully made, and now it lay damaged in the dirt. The Buddha's expression remained peaceful. He looked at the king and again spoke one word: "Release." The king was now thoroughly confused. He had released the cup. What more was there to let go of? He looked at the Buddha with questioning eyes, his hands now empty, spread slightly in a gesture of bewilderment. The Buddha, seeing the king's confusion, explained, "You have released the cup from your hands, but you have not yet released it from your mind. I can see in your face that you are still holding it, holding the value of it, the significance of it, the loss of it, the confusion about why I asked you to drop it. You have let go physically, but not mentally or emotionally." The king realized this was true. Even though his hands were empty, his mind was full of thoughts about the cup, its beauty, its worth, the effort that went into making it, the meaning of its damage, what this moment signified. "I don't understand, Blessed One," the king admitted. "You asked me to release it, and I did. What more is there to release?" The Buddha gestured to a spot beside him, inviting the king to sit. The king sat down, his mind still churning with confusion and a strange sense of grief over the damaged cup. "Tell me," the Buddha began, "when you held that cup in your hands, what were you holding?" I was holding a golden cup, Blessed One, worth a fortune, crafted as an offering to you. Were you holding gold and gems, or were you holding ideas? Ideas about value, about devotion, about respect, about what makes an offering worthy? The king paused, considering this. I suppose I was holding both, the physical object and what it represented. And when I asked you to release it, you released the physical object. But what happened to all those ideas? What happened to your attachment to its value, to its significance, to what it represented? They're still here, the king admitted, touching his chest. I'm still thinking about them. I'm still disturbed by seeing it damaged on the ground. I'm still wondering if I did something wrong, if my offering was rejected. Exactly, the Buddha said with a gentle smile. The first release, letting go of the physical object, is relatively easy. You opened your hands and gravity did the rest. But the second release, letting go of your attachment to the object, letting go of the stories and meanings you've wrapped around it, this is much more difficult. This is the release that actually brings freedom. The Buddha continued, look at the cup lying there on the ground. Right now, is it causing you suffering? No, Blessed One. The cup itself causes me no suffering. Then what is causing your disturbance? Your confusion? Your sense of loss? The king thought carefully. My thoughts about the cup. My attachment to what it was supposed to be, what this moment was supposed to mean. Yes, the Buddha affirmed. The suffering doesn't come from objects or events themselves. It comes from our clinging to them, our attachment to how we think things should be, our inability to release our grip on ideas and expectations. You came here today with an idea of how this should go. You would present your magnificent gift. I would receive it with gratitude. You would feel virtuous and devoted, and this would be a beautiful moment confirming your spiritual progress. You had written a story in your mind, and you were attached to that story. But I disrupted your story by asking you to drop the cup. Now your mind struggles because reality doesn't match the story you were holding. This gap between expectation and reality, this is where suffering lives. The king nodded slowly, beginning to understand. The Buddha went on, let me ask you another question. Why did you create such an expensive offering? What were you hoping to gain? The king answered honestly, I wanted to show my devotion. I wanted to demonstrate that I value the Dharma. I wanted to make an offering worthy of your teachings. And perhaps I wanted to feel that I had done something significant, something that would advance my spiritual progress. So the cup was never really about me, the Buddha said without judgment. It was about you, your devotion, your worth, your progress, your sense of having done something meaningful. You were not truly giving the cup to me. You were using the cup to create a certain feeling in yourself and a certain image of yourself. This is what I mean by the second release. You must release not just the physical object, but also your attachment to what the object was supposed to do for you. The good feelings it was supposed to create, the spiritual status it was supposed to confer, the identity as a devoted follower it was supposed to establish. The king felt exposed, but also strangely relieved. The Buddha had seen through to the truth of his motivations, and rather than feeling judged, he felt understood. Blessed One, are you saying my offering was worthless? That I shouldn't have brought it? Not at all, the Buddha replied. I'm saying that the value of an offering lies not in its monetary worth, but in the state of mind of the giver. You could offer me a single flower with complete presence and non-attachment, and it would be more precious than 1,000 golden cups offered with ego and expectation. The problem is not the cup itself. Gold is gold, gems are gems. They are neither good nor bad. The problem is the clinging. You wrap that cup in so many layers of meaning and expectation that it became heavy, not with its physical weight, but with the weight of your attachments. The Buddha picked up a small pebble from the ground beside him. This pebble and that golden cup, in their essential nature, they are the same. Both are temporary. Both are made of elements that will eventually return to the earth. but your mind assigns one tremendous value and the other almost none. This arbitrary valuing is the source of so much suffering. When you lose something you've assigned high value to, you suffer. When you fail to obtain something you've decided is valuable, you suffer. When something valuable gets damaged or changes, you suffer. But the objects themselves haven't changed in their essential nature. Only your relationship to them creates the suffering. I asked you to release the cup twice to teach you about these two levels of letting go. The first level, physical release, most people can understand. When something is truly gone, taken away, or destroyed, they eventually let go because they have no choice. But this letting go often comes with grief, anger, or resentment because they haven't truly released their attachment. The second level, mental and emotional release, is the one that brings actual freedom. This is the ability to hold things lightly, to enjoy them without clinging, to use them without being used by them, to appreciate them without needing them to be a certain way. The king sat in silence, absorbing these words. Then he asked, "But Blessed One, if we let go of everything, if we become attached to nothing, won't life become empty and meaningless? Won't we lose all motivation and joy?" Another excellent question, the Buddha said. And this reveals a common misunderstanding. Letting go is not the same as not caring or not engaging with life. You can deeply appreciate beauty without needing to possess it. You can love people profoundly without clinging to them or demanding they never change. You can work toward goals passionately without your happiness depending on achieving them. In fact, when you release your attachments, you often experience things more fully. Right now, you are barely seeing that damaged cup on the ground because your mind is so busy with stories about it. But if you truly released your attachment to what it should be, you could simply see it as it is, an interesting object reflecting sunlight with an unexpected dent adding character to its form. Similarly, when you love someone without clinging, you actually love more purely. When you pursue a goal without desperate attachment to the outcome, you often perform better because you're not paralyzed by fear of failure. When you appreciate beauty without needing to own it, you can find beauty everywhere. The Buddha gestured to the cup again. So now I ask you, can you look at that damaged cup on the ground and release your stories about it? Can you let go of what it was supposed to mean and simply see what is? The king looked at the cup with new eyes. The dent that had seemed like a tragedy now appeared as just a dent, a shape, a change in form. The lost gem was just a stone that had rolled away. The cup was just a cup, lying on the ground, neither good nor bad. And as he released his grip on the stories, something remarkable happened. He felt lighter. The heaviness in his chest dissolved. A small smile appeared on his face. "I see it," the king said softly. "It's just a cup, and I'm just a man sitting here. The story I created was so elaborate, so heavy, and now it's gone." Just like that. "Yes," the Buddha affirmed. "And notice, you still exist. Your devotion still exists. Your appreciation for the Dharma still exists. But you're no longer carrying the unnecessary weight of attachment to how things should be. This is what I teach, not the rejection of life, but the release of suffering. Not the abandonment of caring, but the freedom from clinging. You can have your golden cup. I don't need it. But more importantly, you can have your peace. You can live fully while holding everything lightly." The Buddha then said something that surprised the king. "Now, if you wish, pick up the cup, clean it, have the gem reset, use it in your palace, or give it to someone who would enjoy it. But do so without attachment, as one might arrange flowers, appreciating their beauty while knowing they will fade." The king did pick up the cup, but his relationship to it had completely transformed. It was no longer a heavy symbol of his spiritual worth or a representation of his devotion. It was simply a beautiful object that could be enjoyed without clinging, used without needing, appreciated without demanding permanence. "Blessed One," the king said with deep gratitude, "I came here to make an offering to you, but you have given me something far more valuable, the teaching of release. I understand now that true offering is not giving things, but giving up attachment to things. You understand correctly, the Buddha said. And this teaching extends to everything in life. Every moment asks you the same question. Can you release? Can you let go of how you think things should be and meet life as it actually is? Can you hold your plans, your relationships, your possessions, your ideas about yourself? Can you hold all of it lightly enough that when life asks you to release, you can open your hands without suffering? This is the practice of a lifetime. Again and again, life will ask you to release, sometimes physical objects, but more often your attachments, expectations, and demands. Each time you practice this release, you become freer. Each time you let go, you discover you are still complete. The king bowed deeply, his heart full but his hands empty, and in that emptiness, he found a fullness he had never known. As he left the monastery that day, the king understood that the Buddha's teaching had not been about the cup at all. It had been about every single thing the king held in his life: his throne, his wealth, his identity, his loved ones, his accomplishments, his fears, his hopes, everything. Life would continue to give him things and take them away. People would come and go, circumstances would rise and fall, and through it all, he now had a practice. Release. Let go. Not of life itself, but of the desperate grasping that turns life into suffering. Release the cup from your hands. Then, more importantly, release it from your mind. And in that double release, that complete letting go, find the freedom you've been seeking all along. This parable reveals a profound distinction between physical letting go and true psychological release. Most people can eventually let go of things when forced to, when objects break, relationships end, or circumstances change. But genuine freedom comes from releasing our mental and emotional grip on how we think things should be, not just releasing the physical manifestation. The king's journey illustrates that suffering arises not from objects or events themselves, but from our clinging to ideas, expectations, and stories we wrap around them. The Buddha's request for a double release exposes how we often think we've let go, when we've only performed the surface action while remaining internally attached. You might physically leave a relationship but mentally replay it for years. You might lose money yet remain consumed by thoughts of what it represented. You might give away possessions while still identifying with the status they provided. True release happens when you let go, not just of the thing, but of your entire story about what it means, your attachment to how it should have been, what it represented about you, or what its loss implies. This teaching doesn't advocate for detachment from life or suppression of caring. Rather, it points toward a way of engaging fully while holding everything lightly. You can deeply appreciate beauty without needing to possess it permanently. You can love profoundly without demanding people remain unchanged. You can pursue goals passionately without your worth depending on achievement. When you release your desperate grip, you often experience things more fully because your attention isn't consumed by anxiety about loss or change. Story 9. The Bowl of Milk Rice. Long before he became the Buddha, the spiritual seeker known as Siddhartha Gautama had left behind his life as a prince to search for enlightenment. He had studied with the greatest teachers of his time, mastered their techniques, and then moved beyond them. Still, the ultimate liberation he sought remained elusive. Convinced that the answer lay in extreme asceticism, Siddhartha joined a group of 5 monks who practiced the most severe self-mortification imaginable. They believed that by punishing the body, by reducing it to almost nothing, they could transcend physical existence and achieve spiritual liberation. For 6 long years, Siddhartha pushed his body to the very edge of death. He ate only a single grain of rice per day, sometimes going days without any food at all. He slept on beds of thorns. He held his breath until he collapsed. He stood in the scorching sun without shade. He exposed himself to freezing cold without shelter. He denied himself every comfort, every pleasure, every basic need. His body became skeletal. his ribs protruding sharply, his legs like sticks that could barely support his weight. His skin turned dark and leathery. His hair fell out in clumps. His eyes sank deep into his skull. Villagers who saw him were frightened by his appearance. He looked more like a walking corpse than a living man. The 5 monks who practiced with him were impressed by his dedication. "Surely," they said among themselves, "if anyone can achieve enlightenment through this path, it is Siddhartha. No one has ever demonstrated such discipline, such willpower, such complete rejection of the body." But despite all this suffering, despite pushing himself further than anyone before him, Siddhartha found no enlightenment. His mind, starved along with his body, could not concentrate properly. His meditation was constantly interrupted by the body's desperate signals of distress. Rather than transcending physical existence, he had become completely dominated by it. Every moment consumed by pain, weakness, and the body's struggle to survive. One day, after nearly dying from his extreme practices, Siddhartha had a memory from his childhood. He remembered sitting under a rose apple tree during a festival, watching his father work in the fields. Without any effort or technique, young Siddhartha had spontaneously entered a state of deep meditation, peaceful, joyful, and clear. His body had been healthy and relaxed. His mind had been at ease. And in that natural state, profound meditation had simply arisen. The memory was like a light cutting through darkness. Siddhartha suddenly understood he had been making a fundamental error. Just as his early life of luxury and indulgence had not led to enlightenment, neither would this extreme of self-torture. Both extremes were wrong. Both were forms of being at war with reality. One through excessive indulgence, the other through excessive denial. "A lute string that is too loose will not play," Siddhartha thought to himself, "but a string that is too tight will break." The string must be tuned to just the right tension. Not too loose, not too tight, to produce beautiful music. Perhaps the same is true for the path to enlightenment. Perhaps the way is not through extreme indulgence or extreme asceticism, but through balance. This realization was revolutionary. Everything Siddhartha had been taught suggested that the body was the enemy, that comfort was a trap, that any concession to physical needs was weakness. But his own experience was teaching him something different. That very day, weak and barely able to stand, Siddhartha made a decision that would shock his 5 companions. He decided to eat. He decided to take care of his body. He decided to abandon the path of extreme asceticism. He walked slowly, unsteadily to the nearby Naranjara River. The short journey took tremendous effort. His weakened body could barely function. When he reached the river, he washed himself, removing 6 years of accumulated filth. Then, exhausted, he sat by the riverbank to rest. It was at this moment that a young village woman named Sujata appeared. She was the daughter of a wealthy farmer and had come to the river to make an offering to the tree spirits, thanking them for answering her prayers. She carried with her a golden bowl filled with a special preparation of milk rice cooked slowly in rich milk with honey and ghee, a nourishing and delicious food reserved for special occasions. When Sujata saw Siddhartha sitting beneath the tree, skeletal and radiant with an otherworldly quality, she mistook him for a tree deity. She had been praying for a child, and her prayers had been answered. This offering was her gratitude. She approached respectfully and bowed low. "O Divine Spirit," she said, her voice trembling with reverence, "please accept this humble offering in gratitude for your blessings. May you be pleased with this gift." She placed the golden bowl of milk rice before Siddhartha and bowed again, then quickly departed, her heart full of joy at having encountered what she believed was a divine being. Siddhartha looked at the bowl of milk rice. The aroma rose to meet him, sweet, nourishing, inviting. His body, starved for so long, responded immediately with intense hunger. His mind, however, was filled with conflicting thoughts. Everything he had believed for 6 years told him to refuse this food. To accept it would be to fail, to give up, to prove himself weak. His 5 companions would be disappointed. His years of effort would seem wasted. All the teachers who advocated extreme asceticism would say he had taken the easy path, that he lacked the strength to achieve true liberation. But something deeper in Siddhartha, a wisdom beyond conditioning, knew this was right. The path he had been following was destroying his body without freeing his mind. A new way was being offered, literally placed before him in a golden bowl. Siddhartha reached out with trembling hands and lifted the bowl. The milk rice was still warm, creamy, perfectly prepared. He took a small amount and ate slowly, mindfully. The taste was overwhelming after years of eating almost nothing, sweet, rich, satisfying. His body responded with profound gratitude. He ate the entire bowl slowly, with complete attention, with reverence. It was not greedy indulgence, it was conscious nourishment. He was not denying his body nor indulging it mindlessly. He was simply meeting its genuine needs with awareness and respect. As the nourishment began to work its way through his system, Siddhartha felt something shift. His mind, no longer completely dominated by the body's distress signals, began to clear. The constant fog of starvation lifted slightly. For the first time in years, he felt he could actually practice meditation effectively. When Siddhartha's 5 companions discovered what he had done, they were horrified and disgusted. "Siddhartha has given up," one declared. "He has abandoned the path," said another. "He has shown himself to be weak, unable to maintain the discipline," a third added with contempt. "After all these years, he returns to indulgence and comfort like an ordinary person," the fourth said sadly. "He is no longer worthy of our company," concluded the fifth. "We must leave him." The 5 monks departed, shaking their heads, convinced that Siddhartha had failed and that they would continue without him on the true path to enlightenment. Siddhartha watched them go without trying to stop them or explain. He understood their perspective. He had shared it until very recently. But he also understood something they did not yet see: the middle way between extremes. Over the following days and weeks, Siddhartha continued to eat moderate, nourishing meals. He allowed his body to recover its strength. He didn't return to the luxury of his princely youth, but neither did he continue torturing his body. He found a balanced approach: simple food in appropriate quantities, adequate rest, basic care of physical needs, but without attachment or excess. As his body healed, his meditation practice deepened in ways it never had during the years of extreme asceticism. His mind, no longer consumed by the body's desperate distress, could become truly still. The clarity he had sought for so long began to emerge. He found a spot under a large fig tree, later known as the Bodhi tree, and made a resolution: "I will not rise from this spot until I have found the liberation I seek." And it was from this place of balance, body nourished but not indulged, mind clear but not strained, effort present but not forced, that Siddhartha finally achieved the breakthrough he had been seeking. After a night of deep meditation, as the morning star appeared in the sky, he awakened fully and completely. He became the Buddha, the enlightened one. The enlightenment he achieved came not from destroying the body, but from honoring it appropriately. Not from extreme indulgence, but from balanced care. Not from one extreme or the other, but from the middle way. Later, when the Buddha began teaching, he often told the story of his own journey to illustrate a fundamental principle. He would explain to his students, "I tried the path of luxury and sensual indulgence. It did not lead to liberation. I tried the path of extreme asceticism and self-torture. It also did not lead to liberation. Liberation came through the middle way, avoiding both extremes, finding balance. A lute string that is too loose cannot be played. A string that is too tight will break, but a string with just the right tension produces beautiful music. Similarly, if you are too indulgent with yourself, you will not develop the discipline and clarity needed for awakening. But if you are too harsh with yourself, you will damage your body and mind, making practice impossible. The middle way, appropriate care without excess, discipline without violence, this is the path. The body is not the enemy. It is the vehicle for practice. You cannot practice meditation without a functioning body. You cannot develop wisdom if your mind is clouded by the body's distress. Therefore, take care of the body, not with excessive indulgence, but with the same care a musician gives to their instrument, knowing it is necessary for creating music. When the Buddha later encountered his 5 former companions, they initially refused to acknowledge him, still believing he had failed by accepting the bowl of milk rice. But when they heard him teach and saw the depth of his realization, they recognized their error. He had not failed by accepting nourishment. He had finally succeeded by discovering balance. The 5 monks became his first disciples, and he taught them what he had learned. Excessive pleasure-seeking is degrading and leads nowhere. Excessive self-mortification is painful and leads nowhere. I have found the middle path, which opens the eyes and opens the mind, which leads to peace, to wisdom, to enlightenment. The Buddha would often point to his own journey as a teaching. I searched for enlightenment in palaces of pleasure and found it not. I searched for it through extreme suffering and found it not. I found it when I stopped fighting reality, when I stopped going to extremes, when I simply found the balanced way of being present with what is. Years later, when the Buddha told this story to his students, he would hold up the example of Sujata's offering as a turning point, not just a meal, but a teaching about receiving what is offered with wisdom, about knowing when to hold firm to discipline and when to soften into balance, about having the courage to abandon even long-held paths when they are not serving the ultimate goal. That bowl of milk rice, the Buddha would say with a gentle smile, saved my life and made enlightenment possible. Not because there was anything magical about the food itself, but because it represented a principle I needed to learn: balance, the middle way. Not too tight, not too loose, not too much, not too little, not harsh, not indulgent, just enough, just right. And this principle applies to everything, not just to food and physical practices, but to effort in meditation, to discipline in life, to emotional responses, to relationships, to work, to rest. Always seek the middle way. When you find yourself going to an extreme in either direction, pause and ask, is this balanced? Is this sustainable? Is this wise? The goal is not to destroy desire, but to understand it. Not to punish the body, but to respect it. Not to eliminate the self, but to see through the illusion of a separate, permanent self. And all of this requires a mind that is clear and a body that is functional, both of which require balance. The teaching of the milk rice bowl became one of the Buddha's most important lessons, often summarized in the teaching of the middle way. Avoiding extremes, finding balance, understanding that the path to liberation is not through violence against oneself or others, but through wise, moderate, mindful living. Even at the end of his life, the Buddha emphasized balance. He told his followers not to mourn excessively, not to go to the extreme of overwhelming grief, but also not to suppress their sadness. He encouraged them to feel what they felt, to honor the body and its eventual death, but not to cling or despair. The bowl of milk rice that Sujata offered became legendary, not because it was magical or blessed, but because it represented the moment when the future Buddha learned perhaps his most important lesson. Liberation comes not from war with reality, but from wise relationship with it, not from rejecting one extreme in favor of another, but from finding the path that walks between them with balance, awareness, and grace. This parable teaches that wisdom lies in balance, not in extremes. Before his enlightenment, Siddhartha tried both excessive indulgence as a prince and extreme asceticism as a monk. Neither path led to liberation. True breakthrough came only when he discovered the middle way, understanding that you can't develop clarity by destroying the vehicle that makes practice possible. The body isn't the enemy to be conquered through punishment, nor is it an identity to be indulged without awareness. It's the instrument through which awakening happens, requiring care without attachment. Most people oscillate between extremes throughout their lives. They swing from strict discipline to complete abandon, from harsh self-criticism to defensive justification, from overwork to collapse, from rigid control to chaotic release. Each extreme creates its own problems. Too tight and you break, too loose and you accomplish nothing. The middle way isn't a compromise between extremes or a lukewarm halfway point. It's a dynamic balance, like a musician tuning a string to precisely the right tension for beautiful music. This principle extends beyond physical practices to every aspect of life. In relationships, balance means neither clinging desperately nor maintaining cold distance. In work, it means neither burning out through over-effort nor coasting through minimal engagement. In emotional life, it means neither suppressing feelings nor being overwhelmed by them. In spiritual practice, it means cultivating discipline without violence toward yourself, progressing without forcing, and accepting where you are while working skillfully toward growth. Story 10. The Mountain Flower. There was once a devoted student named Kasan who came to study Zen under a master known for his cryptic teachings and profound silence. Kasan was earnest and sincere, filled with enthusiasm for the spiritual path. He had read extensively about enlightenment, heard stories of masters who achieved sudden awakening, and was eager to experience the truth for himself. On his first day at the monastery, Kasan approached the master with excitement and asked, "Master, what is enlightenment? What will I experience when I awaken?" The old master looked at him for a long moment, then said something that seemed simple, almost disappointingly ordinary. "Before you study Zen, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. While you are studying Zen, mountains are no longer mountains and rivers are no longer rivers. But once you have attained enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains, and rivers are once again rivers." Kasan was confused. He had expected something profound, something mystical, some description of transcendent states or cosmic consciousness. Instead, the master seemed to be saying that after all the work of spiritual practice, you end up exactly where you started, seeing mountains as mountains. "But master," Kasan protested, "what is the difference between the beginning and the end if mountains are mountains in both cases? Why make the journey if we return to where we started?" The master smiled slightly, but said no more. He simply gestured for Kasan to join the other monks in their daily meditation practice. For the first few months, Kasan practiced with great enthusiasm. Meditation was exciting and new. He had various experiences, moments of calm, feelings of bliss, insights into the nature of his thoughts. Everything felt meaningful and special. During this time, when he looked at the mountains surrounding the monastery, he saw them simply as mountains, solid, unchanging, separate from himself. They were objects out there, and he was a subject in here, looking at them. This was the first stage. Mountains are mountains. But as his practice deepened, and he began studying the teachings more seriously, everything started to shift and become strange. He learned that solid objects are mostly empty space, that what appears permanent is constantly changing, that the boundary between self and other is conceptual rather than absolute. His teacher gave him koans, paradoxical questions designed to break through rational thinking. What is the sound of one hand clapping? What was your original face before your parents were born? If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. These puzzling questions began to infiltrate Kasan's mind. His certainty about everything started to dissolve. When he looked at the mountains now, they no longer seemed solid and simple. Were they really mountains? Or were they just collections of atoms, temporarily arranged in mountain shapes? Were they separate objects? Or were they inseparable from everything around them, from the sky, the air, the earth, and from himself? The more he analyzed, the more mysterious everything became. What was a mountain, anyway? Just a concept, a word applied to a particular arrangement of matter. But where did the mountain begin and end? At what altitude did mountains stop being mountain? If you removed one rock, was it still the same mountain? If you removed half the rocks, all the rocks, nothing seemed solid anymore. Everything dissolved into questions, into uncertainty, into concepts built upon concepts. The simple world of his earlier life, where mountains were obviously mountains and required no further investigation, now seemed impossibly naive. When he looked at the mountains during this period, he didn't see mountains. He saw problems to be solved, concepts to be deconstructed, koans to be penetrated. The direct experience of simply seeing was overlaid with constant analysis, questioning, and philosophical examination. This was the second stage. Mountains are no longer mountains. Kassan found this stage exhausting and disorienting. Nothing seemed real or solid. His sense of self became questionable. Who was this Kassan that seemed to exist? Just another concept, another temporary arrangement of causes and conditions. Even his determination to achieve enlightenment seemed like an illusion. Who was trying to achieve what? He had conversations with his fellow monks that would have sounded absurd to outsiders. Did you eat breakfast this morning? What is eating? What is breakfast? What is morning? What is I? Everything became a philosophical puzzle. He could no longer do anything simply or directly. Every action was fraught with layers of meaning and analysis. Some students gave up during this stage, finding it too confusing and impractical. They returned to conventional life where mountains were just mountains, satisfied with surface-level understanding. But Kassan persisted, even though he often felt he was losing his mind rather than finding enlightenment. He continued his meditation practice, continued sitting with the koans, continued pushing through the confusion and uncertainty. Years passed. The enthusiasm of the beginning had faded. The fascinating strangeness of the middle period had become tiresome. Kassan found himself in a kind of desert, no longer a beginner's excitement, no longer interested in philosophical games, but not yet arrived at any resolution. He felt stuck, frustrated, and increasingly doubtful that there was anything to achieve at all. Perhaps the whole thing was an elaborate delusion. Perhaps his master's teaching about mountains being mountains again at the end was just a way of saying that all this practice was ultimately pointless. One morning, after a particularly difficult night of meditation, where his mind had been restless and his body painful, Kassan walked outside into the dawn. He was exhausted, physically tired, mentally worn out, spiritually discouraged. He had stopped trying, he had stopped seeking, he had simply given up. He stood on the monastery steps, and his eyes fell on the mountains in the distance, now touched by the first light of dawn. The peaks were glowing pink and gold. Morning mist was rising from the valleys, and suddenly, without any fanfare or special experience, without any cosmic revelation or mystical state, Kassan simply saw the mountains. Not mountains as solid, separate objects, the first stage. Not mountains as concepts to be deconstructed and analyzed, the second stage. Just mountains. Simply this, just as they are. The seeing happened before any thought about what was being seen. The mountains were completely themselves, present, vivid, exactly as they appeared. There was no gap between the seeing and what was seen. No observer separate from the observed, just seeing, just mountains. And in that moment, Kassan understood what his master had meant 3 years earlier. At the beginning, mountains are mountains meant naive, unquestioned acceptance. He saw mountains and never looked deeper, never questioned, never truly paid attention. His seeing was filtered through countless assumptions and concepts he didn't know he was making. In the middle, mountains are no longer mountains meant analysis and deconstruction. He had looked so deeply, questioned so thoroughly, analyzed so extensively that he could no longer see the mountains themselves. Only his thoughts about mountains, his concepts overlaying direct experience. But now, at what felt like an end, though he sensed it was also a new beginning, mountains are once again mountains, meant direct seeing, free from both naive assumptions and analytical overlay. The mountains were simply what they were, appearing in awareness with pristine clarity. Nothing added, nothing taken away. No need to affirm or deny, to conceptualize or analyze. Just this. Just seeing. Just mountains being mountains. The difference was not in the mountains. They had always been exactly what they were. The difference was in the seeing. After the journey through questioning and analysis, Kasan had returned to directness, but now it was an informed directness, a clarity that had passed through confusion and emerged cleaner. It was like the difference between a child who has never questioned what a mountain is, an adolescent who obsessively questions everything about mountains, and an adult who has questioned deeply but returns to simple, clear seeing, now enriched by understanding but no longer burdened by it. Kasan rushed to his master's room and bowed deeply. "Master, I understand now. Mountains are mountains." The master looked at him carefully, then asked, "Are you sure?" Kasan paused. In the past, he would have immediately defended his understanding, would have tried to prove his enlightenment. But now something was different. He smiled. "The mountain is sure," he said. "I am just the seeing." The master laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh. "Good. Now you can begin." "Begin?" Kasan asked, confused. "I thought this was the end." "The end of seeking," the master replied. "The beginning of living. You have climbed the mountain of practice and returned to the valley. But now you see the valley with mountain eyes. Now the real work begins. Living this understanding, expressing it in every moment, meeting each thing just as it is." Over time, Kasan came to understand that the 3 stages his master had described were not really 3 separate states, but 3 aspects of one continuous process. And this process was not something that happened once and then ended. It was happening continuously, in every moment, in every perception, in every experience. With each new situation, there was the naive first seeing. Mountains are mountains. The analytical questioning. Mountains are no longer mountains. And the possibility of direct, clear seeing. Mountains are once again mountains. The journey from confusion to clarity wasn't a path you walked once. It was the structure of every moment of awareness. When Kasan eventually became a teacher himself, students would ask him the same question he had asked his master. "What is enlightenment?" And he would sometimes answer with the same teaching about mountains, but he would add something from his own experience. "Before you practice, you see mountains and think you see clearly, but you're seeing through a fog of assumptions you don't know you're making. When you begin practice, you see that you weren't seeing clearly at all. You see the fog itself, and everything becomes uncertain. This is necessary but uncomfortable. Many people stop here, either returning to naive certainty or getting lost in infinite analysis. But if you continue, if you sit with the uncertainty without trying to resolve it prematurely, something shifts. The fog clears, and you see mountains again. But now the seeing is direct, clear, empty of assumptions. You're not looking at concepts about mountains. You're not lost in analysis of what mountains mean. You're simply seeing what is actually here. The mountains were always just mountains, but you had to journey through complexity to arrive at simplicity. You had to question everything to return to directness. You had to lose the path to find the way. Sometimes students would push back. "But isn't that just returning to where we started? What's the point?" And Kasan would smile and say, "Look at your hand. Before you studied anatomy, you saw your hand and thought you understood it. After studying anatomy, you see bones, muscles, tendons, blood vessels. The hand disappears into its components. But once you truly understand, you see your hand again. Simple, whole, functioning perfectly. The difference is that now when you see your hand, you see it completely. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is denied. It's just your hand, but now you really see it." Enlightenment is not becoming something you weren't. It's seeing clearly what you have always been, what everything has always been. Mountains have always been mountains. You had to travel through confusion to recognize this simple truth. Years later, when Kasan was old and his own students had become teachers, he would sometimes sit on the monastery steps at dawn, watching the mountains appear in the morning light, just as he had on that morning of his understanding decades earlier. And each time, he would see them freshly, mountains being mountains, nothing more, nothing less, completely sufficient, absolutely themselves. And each time there was the slight smile of someone who had journeyed far only to discover he had never left home. The mountain had always been the mountain. But now the seeing was clear. One of his final students asked him, near the end of his life, "Master, after all your years of practice, what have you gained?" Kazan thought for a moment, then replied, "Nothing at all. But I have lost everything that prevented me from seeing what was always here. Mountains were always mountains. I just had to lose my ideas about mountains to finally see them." He passed away peacefully that year, sitting in meditation, facing the mountains that had witnessed his entire journey, from naive seeing through confusion to clarity, and ultimately to the simple, profound recognition that had been available all along. Mountains are mountains. Rivers are rivers. And in their simple being, they express the ultimate truth more eloquently than 1,000 words. This profound teaching maps the journey of genuine understanding through 3 inevitable stages. Initially, we see things with naive certainty. Mountains are obviously mountains, and we don't question our perceptions or assumptions. This isn't true clarity, it's simply unexamined conventionality. When we begin genuine inquiry through meditation, study, or life's challenges, we enter the second stage where everything we thought we knew dissolves. Mountains are no longer simply mountains, they become questions, concepts, problems to be analyzed. This deconstruction is necessary but disorienting. Many people either retreat to naive certainty or get permanently lost in philosophical abstraction. The practical wisdom is recognizing which stage you're in and respecting each stage's necessity. Don't cling to naive simplicity when complexity is calling for attention. Don't get stuck in endless analysis when direct seeing becomes possible. And understand that arriving at clear seeing isn't the end. It's the beginning of actually living from that clarity, moment by moment, meeting each mountain simply as the mountain it is. Thank you for spending these quiet moments with us. If this story and the Buddha's wisdom brought a little peace and clarity to your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel to continue this journey together. May your mind be gentle, your heart be light, and your days be guided by mindfulness and compassion. So here's what's interesting about this parable, and maybe you've already noticed it. The teaching isn't something you add to your life. It's something you recognize was already true. The monk didn't become enlightened by gaining something new. The king didn't find peace by acquiring more wisdom. The transformation happened when something false fell away, revealing what was underneath all along. This is why these stories bring instant calm. They're not asking you to become different. They're showing you what you've been overlooking. Tomorrow, you'll face the same challenges, the same difficult people, the same circumstances that triggered stress before. But here's the subtle shift. You might notice yourself remembering this story at the exact moment you need it, not because you memorized it, but because truth has a way of surfacing precisely when it's relevant. That person who frustrates you, suddenly you'll see them differently. That situation that seemed impossible, suddenly there's space around it. That pattern you've been stuck in, suddenly it's just a pattern, and patterns can change. The ancient teachers understood something we're only now rediscovering. Transformation doesn't require effort. It requires seeing clearly. And stories help us see what our busy, analytical minds usually miss. You don't need to do anything with what you heard today. Just let it be there, planted, germinating, and notice what emerges. Until next time, may you find peace in the most unexpected moments.